1 week season.
Welcome, everybody, to week 6 of Solo Ship. I'm Squirrel Patrol from 4for4 Football, wearing the 4for4 shirt
Yes.
today. Joined by JM to win from 1 week season. JM, so in week 5, I had a very show appropriate week because my single entry teams. I made about 5 single entry lineups, and I had said I liked CJ Stroud as like a black horse, quarterback. He ended up having one of the best quarterback, days of the week. He actually outscored Justin Fields. I said I was down on Justin Fields, and even having him in one of my 5 single entry rosters, I was under the field, right? Because he was 40% in single entry. It was setting up to be a banner week for me, and then Justin Fields just had a bananas fourth quarter. Daniel Jones, who was high on, did so well, leading the Colts, that he did not play in the fourth quarter, I don't think. But how was your week 5?
Yeah, the Justin Fields thing is right in line with it, where it play I don't think in my 10 years of content that I've ever had a week where everything played out exactly the way that I said it would, and the Fields one, it was here are all the risk factors on Justin Fields, and all of those played out, and then it was but I still, for me, he was on 30% of my bankroll was attached to Justin Fields. It was if he hits, this is how he hits. It has to happen late in the game. And it all came together, right? But it just as easily could have not, right? So then it was what are the mix and matches behind that? I didn't end up having any big hits. I had my favorite way to play Fields was Fields, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Ferguson, Javonte Williams, George Pickens. And we got probably an 80th percentile run out for that. And my final 2 pieces on that roster were it was Saints defense, but then Gibbs and Jameson Williams. The other way to play it was Rico Dowdle and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I played it the wrong way, which was the difference between 6th in the game changer and being out of the money. But no, to me, it was one of those weeks where the results weren't there, but I hardly noticed that because I was man, what a fun week. I was did I have a crystal ball? Everything played out the way I said. And not every week it's rare that weeks are like that. So yeah, it was kind of fun from that standpoint. It's well, I'm still on point and still positive ROI because we've had some big hits. And so let's keep it rolling and see how this week shapes up.
Yeah, so the week, I say the week was so appropriate for me because I ended up with CJ Stroud on 20% of my single entry roster. So my single entry, lineups all did, as a group did well because I had 20% Fields, 20% CJ Stroud, who actually outscored Fields, had enough Rico Dowdle, to carry my way. But in my larger field entry, I had 4% CJ Stroud and probably 8% Justin Fields because I wanted to be way under the field. But yeah, on to week 6, we have another 10-game slate. So last week, the big story I thought was Rico Dowdle and Rachaad White. We had all these value running backs, but I kind of had this warning that we can get this big discount in price. We don't necessarily need it because we don't have Christian McCaffrey. We don't have Puka Nacua on last week's main slate. This week, those guys are back, and we have Jonathan Taylor as well. And those guys are all priced up now. It's now week 6. Christian McCaffrey is at $1,200, I think, more than he was in week 1. Puka Nacua has really separated himself. He's much more expensive. I think he's over 10,000 on FanDuel. I think he's cheaper on DraftKings. But we have the same backup running backs. We have Rico Dowdle, we have Rachaad White, but they're more expensive. But we actually need them as discounts because they're still probably not expensive enough. So this interesting dynamic between the highest priced players and how much do we need savings and how much savings do we need? What are your thoughts on the week as a whole? What do you think about the value running backs?
Yeah, I think running back, this is the 3rd week in a row where I've got an 8 or 9 running back pool. And I was just talking about this on the Angles podcast, but I try to let the week come to me, right? Not if I've got a 3 running back pool, I'm not going to be I got to add more guys in to have more variability. If I've got 8 guys, I'm not going to artificially say, all right, I'm cutting these guys out or take a stand here, right? It's I like these 8 guys. I'll mix and match them across my single entry 3 max. In the last couple of weeks, doing that, you just expose you to a bunch of 25 to 30 point scores, right? So last week I had 50% Rico Dowdle because I felt and we talked about last week, there's really no place to spend that salary, but it was kind of what I kept saying was he can post one of the top running back scores on the slate and he's 4,300, right? So it's not we're just hoping for a good salary multiplier. We think he can put up one of the top scores and, he ended up putting up the top score. So he's in the same bucket for me this week where it's he can put up one of the top scores. I think, he's probably a tiny bit worse than or a tiny bit better than Chuba Hubbard in the role that Hubbard had last year. Is like how I look at him, right? So last year, Hubbard had some 30 pointers, some 16 pointers. He was typically priced like 6,600. Javonte Williams, I keep saying that he's the new James Conner, right? Like he's always going to get positive yards. He's going to be involved in all aspects of the game. He's not going to have a bunch of breakaway runs, but like he's going to get you 16 plus points almost every week with shots at 30. So I think that running back's pretty stacked. And I think quarterback is pretty thin, like once again, where it's like last week it was like Fields is the top play to me on paper, but there's clear paths to failure. So what could hit if Fields doesn't? And then it's like, I don't know, right? And this week it's like, to me, Bryce Young against the Cowboys is to me the best play on paper, even more clear paths to failure. But what hits if he doesn't? I don't know. So that's kind of how I look at this slate, is like a lot of certainty at running back and a lot of options, not a lot of certainty at quarterback.
Yeah. So we'll start, I guess the highest total game of the week is that Carolina Dallas game. The Bryce Young, again, the quarterback, the won me my solo million maker. Always got to throw that in because I think that's his career highlight, not just my DFS career highlight is winning me the million maker. But yeah, at just 4,800. So it's a very different story on FanDuel where you don't always need like the quarterback savings. You don't get as much for dropping down in price. Like Bryce Young 7,000 on FanDuel, but on DraftKings at 4,800, that is a bargain price tag going up against an offense that has allowed the most yards per game in the NFL. You potentially, if you want to skip Rico Dowdle in a Bryce Young lineup, you're getting some leverage if Dowdle fails. I still think Dowdle's like just way too cheap at 5,800. And then you've got, one of the best young wide receivers in the game in Ted McMillan. You also have Jalen Coco returning. The Dallas side is favored, however, and Dak Prescott might not see as much ownership because he's up there in price. I think he's the second most expensive quarterback. But George Pickens is a clear pairing option with Dak Prescott, and Jake Ferguson, I think second in the league in receptions. I guess thoughts on that game. Do you prefer the Carolina side for the savings, or do you think that the Dallas side is maybe where you would want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thought is to bet on the game, and so then it becomes almost this thing of do I think Dak is overpriced for his likeliest outcome? Yeah, because I think that the Cowboys could control this one. But what if I'm not betting on like the middling outcome, right? What if I'm betting on the game environment being 41-35 or 38-31 or whatever? Then all of a sudden we're just raw score. These two end up being up there near the top. So what I'm kind of thinking right now is like, just because maybe this will shift after I talk to you, maybe you'll have some insights on other quarterbacks and something you like that I'm not seeing. Right now I'm kind of like looking at, it's Friday, right? We got time. But I'm kind of looking at like maybe 50% of my bankroll goes toward Bryce Young and Dak Prescott, where it's like 20-30 or 25-25. And then the other 50% goes like a mix and match of 5 different guys, like 10% to 5 different guys. But I do see this as the game environment I want to bet on the most. To me, there's a couple of things, right? Like Bryce Young, we brought this up last week actually, but like it's 4 of his last 11 games. He's scored, that's over 36%. He's scored 23.9 or more, 23.6 or more DraftKings points. 3 of those games have been 26 plus. He's got a 36 pointer in there. At 36% of his games at 4,800 putting up those scores. The problem is like when he misses so bad, right? But we don't care about cashing in tournaments. We're trying to win tournaments. So the fact that his ceiling is so high, I think really matters. The big risk factor to me is like Bryce Young doesn't typically get stopped by the opposing defense. He's usually stopping himself, right? Like he's throwing off-target throws. He's throwing bad interceptions. He's fumbling the ball. And so it becomes this thing of like, yes, the matchup's so soft. I think that actually the Cowboys are sort of rounding into form a little bit, right? I mean, Eberflus is a good defensive coordinator. They're not going to be awful all season, I don't think, but it's still a soft matchup. But it's like, does that matter? Does Bryce Young actually just play poorly and it doesn't matter, And so that's the big risk factor there. And if that happens, it drags down the whole game environment because Dak doesn't have to stay aggressive throughout. So that's sort of where I'm at on that one.
Yeah, I think it's the top game environment. I don't know if I would do like 50% that game environment and 50% like other game environments. I think there are some other good good game environments, good quarterback options. Like I have like Dak and Bryce Young both in my top 5 at least. I think Dak maybe top 5 in FanDuel, but not DraftKings. I would say that like Drake May is in a good spot, but he's going to see ownership, but it is indoors. So like it's deserved ownership. And I don't think we're going to see like 30% Drake May, 40% Drake May, like we saw with Justin Fields. So I think we'll see like a reasonable amount of Drake May ownership. And even if he's like one of the higher owned quarterbacks, like I'm fine with that. I think he's in one of the best spots. I think Baker Mayfield is interesting. Mayfield actually grows on me with Chris Godwin out because I think it's easier to like, because his receivers are kind of cheaper, right? If you wanted to go to like Chris Godwin, now you're maybe going to Sterling Shepard and he's like 3,600 or 3,800. Yeah. So you can actually like stack Baker Mayfield cheaper than you could have before the Chris Godwin injury. And so I like Egbuka as one of the top wide receiver plays. I've been mentioning Cade Otton on every show I've done so far. So I'll continue to mention Cade Otton. That we always think of Cade Otton when the Bucs have like a really depleted wide receiver core, right? Like that stretch of games he had where like Mike Evans was out, Chris Godwin was out, and Cade Otton was like the wide receiver one. Well, we're kind of back in the situation where, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are out. Of course, Egbuka is there now, but I think at his discounted price tag and not much of an opportunity cost at the tight end position, I think Cade Otton deserves mention. But yeah, so just another way of saying, I think you can stack up Baker Mayfield cheaply, and he's the second or highest scoring fantasy quarterback so far this season on this slate in terms of guys on this slate. Like he's like second, I think, in DraftKings points per game, first in FanDuel points per game. And then other quarterbacks like Spencer Rattler, I think deserves some consideration. And I'll throw out a pretty ugly name, but Cam Ward, I think is like viable for like super large field tournaments because I think the Raiders are going to be the softest defense he's faced so far in his NFL career. And he's faced some really tough defenses, but like now it's starting to be, well, he's got some experience under his belt. He's ridiculously cheap. No one's going to play him. And Cam Ward will go down, I think, as my off the radar play that I'm over the field on in my 150 set.
Yeah, I'm on board for that in large field play. And I'm on board for my other, the main guys I'm circling, like if I have 5 other guys, right now on Friday morning, Friday afternoon, like those 5 guys would probably be Drake May, Justin Herbert, both quarterbacks in the Bucs 49ers game, and Trevor Lawrence. And so, because it's like the Bucs 49ers is a game that could become super high scoring. That Jags Seahawks game could become super high scoring. And if it's super high scoring, we know that Darnold isn't going to throw the ball more than 34 times even then. And he's not going to run the ball until like Trevor Lawrence has more outs to the top score from that game environment. And so it's kind of like, where else could the game environments develop? I like the thing with Drake May. I think that he's the highest probability guy to post like 20 to 24, but like pretty low probability to hit it like 28 to 30. So if it's one of these weeks where nobody hits 28 to 30, Drake May ends up being kind of like the way to go. Although I do think, I don't think it's easy to figure out who to stack him with. Like, I don't think Stephon Diggs is just the auto play that people are going to think. But yeah, it's hard for me to see the ceiling because the Saints are like, they're not bad on offense, but they're also not good, right? They haven't top 20 offensive points this year. And with Christian Gonzalez back, the Patriots defense is good. So yeah, it's hard for me to see that becoming like a high scoring game where the Patriots are pushed to be really aggressive. But I think that the solid score is there to be had for Drake May. It's hard to find like things to love this week. I think there's this is a very high variance week at the quarterback position.
I'll say that something that strikes me this week is it's probably a good week to overstack or like to be stacking every lineup. So like just in terms of Drake May, I would say like Hunter Henry and Rashid Shaheed maybe, and you know it's a skinny stack, and then you just hope those guys hit. Maybe Drake May gets a rushing touchdown. I'll say when the prices are rising now on our reliable guys, like our Christian McCaffreys, like Puka Nacua, Jonathan Taylor, like all those guys, the price is going up. And so like week 1, it would have been like, well, I'm just like jamming in McCaffrey, some good wide receivers. Now with pricing a lot tighter, like you have to be hitting on some like value options, and those value options are maybe only hitting when like they're paired with your quarterback. So I think you do want to it's definitely as the season goes on and pricing gets tighter, I think it's more important to stack. I guess like something, since I mentioned Cam Ward, we'll go through like that. There's a couple of outlier games on the load. So we talked about Dallas and Carolina has the highest total. We've got Cleveland and Pittsburgh at 38 points, and then Tennessee and the Raiders at 41.5 points. All of the other 7 games are pretty packed between like 43 and 47, I think 47.5. Anything that you like from Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or Tennessee and the Raiders, or are those like scratch off games for you in single entry?
Yeah, no, I think Quinshon Judkins and David Njoku are both viable from the Steelers and Browns game. The only concern with Judkins is like he's kind of a step below the other obvious running backs to me, because like it's harder for him to get a 2-touchdown game if the Browns have a hard time scoring 2 touchdowns. But the Steelers haven't been as scary on defense this year as they have been in the past. They're coming off a bye, right? That helps them quite a bit with Mike Tomlin. And Dylan Gabriel, like they didn't ask him to do a lot last week. It was a lot of short area throws and just make the right decision, make the right read, keep the offense on schedule, and then run the ball with Quinshon Judkins. So I could see the Browns scoring like 17 or 20 points here, and Judkins getting both those touchdowns. And then, I think Njoku. And then for the Raiders one, I've been back and forth on Genty, but it is like, only because the offense around him is so bad that like if all you can do is run the ball and get hit behind the line of scrimmage and then like throw downfield and occasionally hit it, most of the time you're punting, because like it's 2nd and 10, it's 3rd and 10. Yeah, you just hit a 30-yarder, but now you start a new set of downs and like you got to start all over again with another 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10. So Genty, I've been like back and forth on like, can the Raiders lean on him enough to stay on schedule against the Titans? And then I think that like, on the Titan side, you've got cheap enough guys that it's viable. Both those games, like, or not the Steelers Browns game. I don't see that one trending high scoring. I think that there's 2 viable guys in the Browns. The other game, like Raiders and Titans, could trend high scoring. Like it could be a weird random 31-28 game with a bunch of cheap guys and nobody's on them.
Yeah, I think it's a game. I'll definitely have some stacks. Probably not single entry, but Genty, Calvin Ridley, like Cam Ward, is like makes some sense. And I say that it's one of the lower 2 lower scoring games on the slate. Well, it's 41.5, and most of the other games are between 43 and 47. It's not like it's touchdowns less than the other game. But I kind of agree. I think it's Quinshon Judkins or bust for me. With the Cleveland Pittsburgh game, Judkins is interesting because he's priced right between Rachaad White and Rico Dowdle, and people are just going to click on White and click on Rico Dowdle. Projections are going to click you on, get you on White and Dowdle. But like Judkins is like still projected fairly decently, like within a touchdown, within 3 or so DraftKings points. So he could easily outscore those guys at lower ownership because he's so talented. But I don't know, it might not be the week, but it's something to keep in mind. Wanted to talk about the wide receiver position. Like when I run some like sample lineups, the top wide receivers I get are Chris Olave, Stephon Diggs, and like I know why, right? They're 5,100 and 5,800. Diggs has had 2 big games. Chris Olave is 2nd in the NFL in targets, doing absolutely nothing with them. I guess your thoughts on the wide receiver position in general, Olave and Diggs, and I'll throw out the 3rd guy, Puka Nacua. Obviously different price range, but I have some concerns on Puka. So I'll let you go first on Olave, Diggs, and the wide receiver position in general.
Yeah, I think wide receiver is thin this week. I think there's a lot of guys in the 4,800 to 6,200 range, 4,800 being Juwan Jennings and Trey Tucker, 6,200 being Brian Thomas Jr. So those guys and everybody in between. So this is all DraftKings. So that's where I play. But in that pricing range, I think that there's a lot of guys who are capable of scoring 25 to 30. There's a pretty good chance like one player from that range does it. And then like a bunch of other guys, if you're just hunting in that range, are going to score like 8, 11, 12, something like that, right? To me, Diggs and Olave are way down the list in that range. And I think that the range is wide open enough that I'm not going to like try to talk people off those guys. But, Olave hasn't topped 60 yards. And this whole offense is predicated on these short throws. He has 1 or 2 downfield targets, so it can happen, right? Happened for Shaheed last week. And then Diggs, I don't think we're gonna fast forward a month from now and like Diggs is priced at 7,200 or something, right? I don't think that this is his consistent week. He played 30 snaps last week. It was a back and forth game. They're chasing points against, the week before he did it on 7 targets. And Diggs isn't like a big play guy. 7 targets for him is typically going to be 5 catches for like 60, 65 yards. Last week it was 12 targets in a very unique game environment. He hit 7 targets. Drake May only threw it 17 times that game, but like Diggs isn't playing a ton of snaps. He played 30 snaps last week. They're still working him back in. This is an offense that rotates players, and so yeah, I don't think that Diggs. I think we have two weeks in a row, and when we fast forward to the end of the season, he's going to have like 4 of these types a week throughout the season, right? So it's like 2 of them just happen back to back. Puka, to me, what I've said this week is like I don't think he's a key decision point on the slate. I think his chances of posting a score that you had to have at his price tag are extremely low, but he's capable of it. And I think in most scenarios, he scores like 23 to 27, right? And so it's like, if the salary's available and you can fit him, then I think he's a great play, but he's not a guy I'm starting rosters with or like forcing iffy savings in order to fit him in is how I'm looking at him.
Yeah, you mentioned fast forwarding to the to the end of the season or in a couple of months, and I just envisioned myself at week 14, and I'm like, got 60% of a $3,800 Chris Olave, got like 70% of a $4,200 Jacoby Myers, just going down the ship every week, playing the guys that get the targets, but end up not doing anything. So I probably just guaranteed a monster week from Chris Olave and Jacoby Myers making that comment. I'll say with Puka, I'm a little bit worried about the salary increase, and I think he's got like a preposterous salary on FanDuel, I think, for half point per reception, but still 8,700. It's 1,100 more than week 1. And there's like a little bit of a weather concern. Like it might actually rain. I think we're getting like a nor'easter or something this weekend. So we might get some like rain and high winds in Baltimore, in which case I think it might be like the Rams are going to score points. But more and more, I'm thinking it might be Kyron Williams. Like it might be a Kyron Williams week rather than a Puka Nacua week. And like you've got like Jackson Smith and Jigba right there, kind of lower in price. And so like I'm kind of like gravitating towards like the young wide receivers, like thinking like, oh, Jackson Smith and Jigba, like Tet McMillan and Egbuka, like might end up being my 3 highest owned wide receivers. I think we had touched on like Seattle a little bit already, but Sam Darnold and JSN like might go down as a pairing where we look back at the end of the season and we think like, why do we not just play this, every week, right? Like Sam Darnold, I think 4 touchdowns last weekend, last Sunday. Like, why are we not playing him? I kind of like the Seattle side more than the Jacksonville side. Like Trevor Lawrence, if Trevor Lawrence hadn't scored 2 rushing touchdowns last game, I think one of which he dropped the ball before he scored. Like he dropped the ball, picked it up, and ran into the end zone. Like I think his fantasy production would look much worse.
Yeah.
So I kind of side with the Sam Darnold JSN inside of that game. But yeah, I guess like moving down the wide receiver position, like any thoughts on like somebody else that jumps out at you? Jalen Waddle probably going to see some ownership. George Pickens. Any of the Colts guys, Pittman or Downs. Any other wide receiver thoughts?
I hadn't gotten into my Kevin Roth brain yet and started looking at the weather. Yeah. But if there's weather concerns, this changes. But I think Zay Flowers is really interesting because I think Cooper Rush, like we've all changed our perception completely about him off of one game against one of the best defenses in football. And one of the things I've talked about this week is the Texans are a good defense because people are like, oh, well, now they're playing the Rams, another good defense. The Texans are a good defense because it's really hard on a play-by-play basis to like find open guys, move the ball on a play-by-play basis. The Rams are a really good defense because they have a great pass rush that disrupts drives, So it's very different. Like on a play-by-play basis, especially with this beat-up secondary for the Rams, like you can move the ball against the Rams. Cooper Rush last week, it was all like, oh, he's 9-5 as a starter. I remember, I think it was Chris Sims, who like I have a ton of respect for. Early in the season, he was like, why is nobody giving Cooper Rush a chance to be a starter? It's like this dude has done well when he's been given opportunities. And now he's, second week, he's going to be starting. I think Zay Flowers is very viable in this spot as a guy that nobody's going to be on and has as much ceiling as anybody else in this range. Yeah, I mean, I think Waddle's viable. I think Tet McMillan's very viable. I think Quentin Johnson is viable again. And those are probably the guys who stand out to me the most in this range. And then I think whoever is the number 1 receiver for the 49ers, so that's going to be Juwan Jennings or Kendrick Bourne, is viable. And we've been talking about Kendrick Bourne since his first week when he was 3,600 and 0% owned. It was like, this is Mac Jones' guy. Like he just came back to 49ers and then he had to go put up that monster game off the main slate. But yeah, whoever's the number 1 there is viable as well.
Yeah, Jennings is now priced below Jawan Jennings or below Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to keep an eye on that. I was actually just pulling up the injury reports to see if there's any updates, because I think Quentin Johnston has been like limited by a hamstring injury. And actually, you should maybe touch on the Chargers. Can mention anything you want about Miami as well on the other side of that game. But the Chargers now without Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris. And so there's a thought of like what is going to happen at the running back situation for the Chargers. And I think what's going to happen is that Justin Herbert's going to throw even more. But I think that Ladd McConkey or Keenan Allen could end up being elevated a little bit, certainly in projection and ownership if Quentin Johnston is out. But yeah, any thoughts on the Chargers, the running back situation, or the Dolphins side for that game?
Yeah, the Chargers are the Chargers offense, like, it doesn't do anything to keep an opponent off balance, right? It's more like our guys can go beat your guys. And then the Dolphins pass defense is kind of like JSN, in that like JSN on a per target basis is Puka Nacua this year. He just doesn't see as many targets. Like the Dolphins pass defense on a per pass basis is as bad as the Cowboys. Just teams don't pass against them because it's so easy to run. So if you think that the Chargers throw the ball more, and then they're going against this Miami pass defense, and what stops the Chargers is sometimes they're like, our guys can beat your guys. And it's like, well, sometimes our guys can't because our offensive line's so bad right now that we're getting wrecked. I think that there's a lot of upside for the Chargers, but also I think the Dolphins pass rush is actually good. And so I think there's a lot of downside too. And then I don't know that I am confident in the Dolphins being able to do it against the Chargers defense. So yeah, there's a lot of question marks for me on this game. I do think it's a very wide open game in how it could play out, right? Like I was the 40 or 44 or 44 and a half over under. Like I was completely unsurprised by that, but I know other people have seen it and be like, whoa, that feels low for this game, right? And I think that sort of shows where this game stands, is like 44 is probably a good number, but it could play way to the upside as well. And so I think that this is a game that we got to account for. So yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, Herbert's kind of one of these satellite guys for me. It's like rotating around this Cowboys-Panthers game. I think it's very viable. I think there's just a lot of question marks here. If Quentin Johnston ends up being out, it makes it a little bit easier, because then you get a chance for like a Ladd McConkey 12-target game, and Keenan Allen, short area, but like 8-9 targets. So yeah, lots in the air on that one, I think.
Yeah, I like just comparing the game totals. I would have thought like Seattle and Jacksonville would have been lower than Chargers Dolphins, right? But it's not. It's like the Chargers Dolphins is lower by about 4.5 points than Seattle and Jacksonville. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the team with the highest implied point total of the week, which is the Packers. One of the reasons we haven't mentioned them so far is because they're 15-point favorites against the Bengals. Joe Flacco driving across the state to start for the Bengals. Is that a game that you can go to with the high total? Obviously I think Josh Jacobs would be in play, but actually I don't mind the idea, of playing some Jordan Love. I think we've seen this with Detroit in the past, where they're massive, like 2-touchdown favorites. Everybody's like hands off, assuming it's going to be a split between Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And then, Jared Goff has had some big games in those situations. Do you think Jordan Love is a place you can go in a large field or single entry, or do you just like Josh Jacobs, or is it totally hands off for that game, or do you like the Joe Flacco side?
No, I don't like the Joe Flacco side. I like Jacobs a lot. With Love, really thought about this one, and it's like he's done it before actually in a blowout win, I think one time, but it's not like the nature of this offense, and they're not a precision like them. Like last week, I don't typically bet over-unders or lines or anything like that. And last week I took the Lions over 10.5. And then I also bet alt lines of like over 11.5, over 13.5, over like, I thought the Lions were just going to stop them. Right. And this week I actually took the Bengals when it was 14.5 because it's just like the Packers aren't that like precision attack that the Lions are. They're more run the ball and then throw the ball downfield. But once this game gets out of hand, how much are they going to keep throwing it downfield? Right. So then you really are just hoping for the touchdowns. So yeah, I'm not like, I think Love is viable. I think he's totally viable in large field play. I like dove into it because I think small field is wide open at quarterback. And so I was like, maybe it's Love. And my conclusion was like, no, that's not where I'm going. Doesn't mean I'm going to be right. But that was sort of how I ended up landing on that one, was like, no, not for single entry 3 max for me. But I do think like that question is worth exploring. and different people might come to different answers and like might decide, yeah, Jordan Love is the way to go here. It's not how I'm seeing, especially because you don't know who to stack him with. But I think Jacobs is the dude, and I think in large field play, Love can make sense for sure.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think I'm higher on Jordan Love than you are. I'll note that he's like the 5th or 6th most expensive quarterback, and that's viable, right? For a team looking at a 30-point implied point total, I do think some of the attack could come through the air and not just like through Josh Jacobs, or sometimes Jacobs gets a reception as well. I guess that about wraps up the 30 minutes. Any final thoughts on the slate that we didn't get to?
No, I did want to mention when you showed your 4-for-4 logo. We had the Bucks and Seahawks game last week. It was like an all-time uniform game with their throwbacks. This is like the all-time logo pairing. It's 2 great logos, 4-for-4 and OWS there up at the top. So yeah, shout out the 4-for-4 logo and the 4-for-4 content with you. And that's all I've got for this week. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so that'll do it for this week. But good luck to everybody this weekend. Hope to see you at the top of the leaderboards, and we will catch you next week.